Hey, what's up YouTube? No longer single Pringle here, back with another video. Part 2, we're going to be diving into techniques to help you emotionally process and discover yourself on a deeper level. The kind of process I'm going to be using is a combination of two things, and then also kind of a third intuition approach. So the first thing is Jungian Shadow Work, which, to be put succinctly, is essentially you having dialogues with parts of your subconscious. And then IFS, which is kind of a series of categorization of parts of your mind, and they're categorized into three parts, which are managers, which preemptively protect against harm, firefighters, which reactively respond to emotional distress, and exiles, which are the wounded parts carrying pain and trauma, and they're often repressed, at least in my experience. So to give an example of what a session would look like utilizing some of these skills and identification, as well as my own kind of intuitive things, is I started doing this relatively recently, although I had done it before and it had worked, but it's one of those weird things where it's like you have to relearn the lesson 4 or 5 times. So anyway, I was doing it and I closed my eyes, I started talking aloud, a thought responded. I was just asking why I was anxious or who was anxious within me. And this little voice responded. And as I kept talking, it became more fleshed out into this kind of 18-year-old version of myself. And the sentiment that it was kind of embodying was, I'm really worried because we really need to work and we really need to get work done, and we're not working efficient enough and we're not fast enough and we're not going to XYZ, and it has to be perfect, and I'm worried about the time, and all of this like anxiety and stress. And at first I wanted to understand him, so I asked him some questions, but that wasn't really working. And a lot of this process that we're talking about is very heuristic. You're trying things and some things don't work, they bounce off, then you just try another thing, try to have compassion about it. So I was asking him some questions, they didn't seem to be really getting us anywhere. So I grabbed him by the shoulders, like mentally in my mind, and I just said, what would happen if you just stopped? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, okay, let's just try. So I held him by the shoulders in my mind, but in like the physical space of my mind, if that makes any sense. And I just held his shoulders and I just was there with him, just there with him. My anxiety completely subsided. It was so strange. I just told him he didn't have to do anything. I didn't solve anything. I didn't fix any problem. I just sat there with that part of myself that was not being heard or seen or approached with genuine love. And I just told him, you don't got to do anything. Let's chill out and do nothing. And that was like one of the best days that I've had in like probably in my whole year, honestly. I just like went out, I was social with a ton of people, I just felt super myself. I went and played piano and I was like killing it. I was just doing stuff that I was surprising myself with, and it was just so nice. And all I did, I just talked to that part of myself and I just like told him it was okay to do nothing. And that is amazing. I used to think that I need to like fix my problems before I can have something like that. No. Sometimes you just need to validate what is going on within you, and that can be hard. It can be really hard to find out like methods to emotionally process, but I feel like this is a very good way of framing it because it actually gives you a tangible thing to talk to, as opposed to some things that might not work for everybody, like, oh, just feel the weight in your body. What is this weight represented? What does it feel like? Where is it located? This is a more dialogue based approach. So now that I've given you an example, I can quickly explain some of the parts of myself, and this might help you kind of navigate your own space and map your own mind. So there's an 18-year-old version of myself, which we kind of talked about. It's like time anxiety, perfectionism, productivity, optimization. And what he needs is just to have somebody tell him it's okay to slow down, right? And then I inquire further, and there has some concern with he doesn't feel like he'll be enough. There's an 8-year-old version of me that is just the 8-year-old version of myself that's kind of just been traumatized by the thing that's going on, and like his dad, and he's like in a onesie and he's holding a stuffed animal, and like he just wants somebody to sit with him. He doesn't need anything other than that. He just needs somebody to sit with him and like every so often just kind of like speak a wisdom to him. like just some stuff that he just doesn't understand because he's younger, or like he hasn't figured it out. An example of this is like mentally in my mind, he was like playing piano and he asked me if he was doing good, and I asked him what he thought, and he said, I don't know. And then I told him, well, what's good to me is how you feel when you play it. And then he thought like, oh, okay. And then he played, and although I couldn't hear what he was playing on either of the occasions that he played, I could tell that he was more at peace with what he was playing. And that was like the end of the session that I had with him. But like, sometimes that's all he needs, right? Just a few words, a few questions, somebody to sit with, just somebody to cry with, you know what I mean? There's a part of myself that is like the embodiment of like my narcoleptic self that needs to have compassion for it. And it's like yelling at me to like, hey, can we rest? Can we go to bed? But because of my own habitual denial of the fact that I have narcolepsy from society and my parents that didn't understand that I had narcolepsy and things like that, it built this own self inside of me of my own stubbornness to deny myself what I needed. So there's a part of me like that. There's a part of me that's like the stubbornness in some sense, which is kind of just like my ego. There's a part of me that's kind of like a shield. It's like somebody's pushing a shield at my face and they're trying to stop me from crying. And it's like that part of me thinks I'm like 7 years old, and like if I do cry, then my brother's gonna get mad because it's gonna get in the way of like our co-op mission to get his gamer score for some Xbox achievement. It's like very complex and based on some experiences you've had, but ultimately what matters now is like the fact that you're talking to them and building relationships with them and actually understanding them, because like we talked about in the first video, it is via understanding that we have realizations and revelations that change our ways organically, the way that we perceive things, which is our life, so to speak. Our life situations can be rough, but only your mind can make life hell. So now we're going to get into kind of the guide. Oh, I should also say, like the 18-year-old version of myself is like a manager, to use the IFS terms. The narcoleptic part of me is kind of like an exile. The 8-year-old part of me is kind of like an exile. The part of me that's shielding me from crying is a firefighter. So there's an emotional response, and then he's putting it out. He's putting it out, right? By invalidating, but that's his job. And he believes in that. He's convicted in that's serving a purpose. He believes that I'm still 7 years old. And so to him, he's convinced that there's a purpose behind it. And that's why these parts of us we have to have compassion for them, because they're serving us some purpose and they're protecting us in some way. And they're not enemies. They're not enemies. You know, they're things that are there. It's like having somebody do something out of love and it just be the wrong thing, or it be not what you needed, or they say something wrong and their intentions were good, right? It's like that. That is those parts of yourself. And you have to treat them as if that, because if you treat them as enemies, they won't want to talk to you. And if they don't talk to you, then you won't understand them, and you need to understand them. So heuristically explore the relationship with them, and don't try to get your ego out of the picture. If you feel offended because they said they need something from you and it wasn't exactly what you were giving to them or the way they were giving them. And also advocate. If they're talking negatively to you, then advocate for yourself and say that, you know what I mean? So step 1, find a quiet and private space. For me, I love my car because it's just very like soundproof. I can kind of drive wherever I want to. I can drive to like a very, very quiet space. For you, it might be your home. It might be a spot in your home. Do that. Whatever you feels the most safe. The most safe and the most quiet. Quiet is good too. Because what we're going to be doing is engaging in dialogue, and the less noise there is, at least the better. But I should say, again, I think I said this in the start, but if something I say seems dogmatic, but it doesn't work for you, or something else works, please disregard what I say. This is just, again, what works for me. So step 2, grab a notebook, a journal, like this one. I literally have a section of this for shadow work and observations and questions and stuff like that. So after my session, I'll write down what I kind of experienced as briefly as I can, summarizing it, or as best I can remember, rather. So step 3 is to close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and kind of just clear your mind a little bit, get into that space. And then step 4 is to greet your subconscious with genuine, curious, and welcoming rhetoric. And you'll speak out loud. For me, I speak out loud and then it answers via my thoughts, almost like a channel. So I'll speak out loud and I'll say something like, all right, whoever feels like they need to express their feelings or say something to me, or just needs to be heard, or is going through a rough time, feel free to speak now and speak to me. I'm not going to judge you. I'm here because I love you, and I'm just trying to help and do my best. Something like that. And it has to be genuine. You have to really mean it, because these parts of you can't be tricked, and a lot of these parts of you are very scared to come out, hence why they're, unconscious and repressed and things like that. And so you have to approach it with a genuine desire to have a real dialogue with them and treat them with respect, because if you don't, you're not going to find a very great relationship with them, and they're going to continue to be repressed, they're going to continue to be confused, and you're going to continue to wander with this part of you that is just being invalidated within you, and that's no bueno. So step 5, engage with whatever part responds. It might feel like a channel of thought coming from a place. For me, I close my eyes, I talk out loud, a channel of thought kind of appears. It's almost directional. Sometimes it's like the 18-year-old version feels like it's coming from here, 8-year-old version feels like it's coming from here, the narcoleptic kind of self that's advocating feels like it's kind of coming from up here, and it's just like, I feel it like coming in a directional almost, but eventually I close my eyes and it becomes very dreamlike, where I can have visual representations of who I'm talking to, and even like spaces that we're in. So step 6, continue to immerse yourself in the dialogue with your own emotional honesty and self-compassion. Remember, this thing is a part of you that needs to be seen, heard, and loved. Really important. We really need, and I will continue to emphasize this because it's super important. You need to treat this part of you with love and respect, because ultimately it is serving a purpose within you. It needs to be heard, it needs to be seen, and the reason why that it creates problems with you, or recurring emotional patterns and stress and thoughts and narratives, is because it's fundamentally not understood and given what it needs. And so it keeps coming back up and knocking at your door, and you're not answering. So let it into your house. And as you do this, you'll notice yourself become more immersed. Parts will become more fleshed out. For me, it's like I can tell what the age of the thing is I'm talking to, roughly. Like I can see it visually. It's just a me. It's like a mini me. So it's like a version of myself that's like a different age. 18-year-old Zan, I can see him, he's in like his 18-year-old Zan clothes, and he's just kind of like in this deer in headlights look, and he's like really panicked and anxious. And 8-year-old me is just like little tiny Zan with a bowl cut in a onesie, holding a stuffed animal, and he's like crying, and he just like needs warmth, and I give him warmth. You know what I mean? So if something that you say or they say creates distance, bitterness, or disengagement, apologize or advocate for yourself. This part of you might not be friendly, and or you might not be giving it what they need. Leave your ego at the door and learn heuristically. Giant, because if you're engaging with this part of yourself and there's conflict on either side, like it's being mean to you, you need to advocate for yourself, albeit calm, cool, collected. You can't bark at it, because then it'll just be scared in some sense. It's not ideal. The ideal version is leaving your ego at the door and just reacting to things as they happen with a cool and calm head. And this is why meditating beforehand might actually be like a useful practice. But I leave that up to optional. It's not necessary. But sometimes you'll say something and it won't work. It'll push them back. Like they'll be like, and they'll respond like that. They'll be like, why'd you ask that? Or like, I feel like you're trying to get something out of me, or that's not really what I need right now. And there might be a part of your ego or pride that steps in and is like, man, fuck this thing. Like, I hate this thing. Like, it doesn't appreciate me or whatever. It's just like, just drop it. Like, you need to have a good relationship with this thing. There is no way around that. So are you going to be like putting them into a dichotomy of they're bad and you're good and they're a problem and you're a fixer? Or are you going to actually have a mature emotional connection and conversation and dialogue with this thing? I choose the latter, and I recommend the latter. Remember, we are building a relationship. That's just super important. We are building a relationship. Step 8, ask deeper questions when it feels appropriate, but do not pry. These are kind of the questions that I talked about in part 1, some of the ones that I had at the end of the video. Like to my anxiety, it might be like, what are you afraid of? Like, what might happen if you slow down, if you stopped being productive, if you stopped optimizing? What would it say about you? And then that part might respond like, well, I wouldn't be good enough. I won't be enough. You know what I mean? And then I might be like, enough for what? And it's just like, enough to be loved, enough to be, like have used my life valuably or something like that. And those are the deeper questions that they might just come off the cuff, they might just come to you. But again, if you want a kind of more of a list, there's some good questions in the part one. What do I gain from this feeling? You know, what are you running from? What might happen if your outcome is achieved? What might happen if your outcome is not achieved? What would it say about you? Those type of questions are really important to ask. Do not pry, because if that part of you does not feel like answering a question right now, it doesn't feel like talking in that manner, that intensely, just let it have that. There's no need to fight it, and it's like pushing on a person, like trying to be their therapist and pushing their buttons, and eventually you're just going to push that person into not really wanting to share or be vulnerable with you. The part of you and of yourself is the same way, so you have to treat it the same way. Step 9, almost there. Stay attentive to the fact that you, the one speaking, may also be challenged by the parts of yourself. And you are equally, or you're not without accountability within the relationship. And that is just to say that the person that is speaking, which you might identify as you, it is not without fault. This is not just like, I'm working on the parts of myself. It's like the parts of yourself sometimes will work on you. For example, the part of me that was an exile, that was like my narcolepsy, it worked on me by telling me, hey, dude, you're not paying attention to the fact that I'm exhausted and tired, and you're like stubbornly trying to be more productive and stuff. And you could say that's a clash of parts of myself, but at the time it felt like me, the one talking, was the one stubborn, because I was saying, yeah, but can't we just do stuff? Or there's nothing wrong with doing stuff, blah, 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 blah. Like I was trying to get away with it. And you could say that was my ego. You could say that that was me being identified with a part of myself. It doesn't really matter. All that matters is that whatever you feel like you're identified with in that current moment, the you that you identify with, it will be called into question periodically by these parts of yourself, and you'll have to learn, and you'll have to take it on the chin. Again, you learn heuristically through trial and error how to be a better person to this person, be a better friend, be a better parent sometimes, you know, be a better older brother, older sister, be a better the wisdom unto them, you know. And the last thing is, after the session, only after the session, try not to interrupt the session with writing notes. Then you'll journal and you'll write as much as you can remember. And this is important because it's demonstrating to the parts of us that we actually care about what they say, and that this is even like, it's just another dimension of how showing them how sacred it is to us, how important their time is and their dialogue with us is to us. And that's something that I heard and I didn't understand until I started doing it, and then it started making a lot more sense. So I don't really have the words for it, but the parts of myself, like if I talk to them, I'm like, they're like, are you going to journal? And I'm like, oh yeah, I should do that. Because they like want to be cared for in that way. They want to feel important, and they are important. And so you should treat them as they are important. That's the end of the video. You made it this far. So if you guys have any questions, comments, comments, I have an email. I'm kind of new to this, making these types of videos. So if you have any criticism, please give me feedback and stuff like that. I hope it was helpful. And yeah, I look forward to you in the next video. Although that one might come a bit later because it's going to be pretty long. So yeah, thanks for watching.